About 2 times throughout the year, I get into a deep obsession with the show Kitchen Nightmares, and I'll binge watch the full series until I completely run out of new episodes to watch, because obviously it's been a while since they made new episodes. Now this happens a couple times a year, and it's just something about Gordon Ramsay screaming at people and calling them idiots that really makes me entertained. Kitchen Nightmares is hosted by the GOAT, Gordon Ramsay. Now if you've never seen the show, it's a roller coaster of a ride to watch. Usually Gordon goes into extremely dirty kitchens, or kitchens that aren't managed properly, and during the episode he drills it into the owner of the restaurant that what they are doing is disgusting, or that they need new management because the management is letting them down. This show has produced a bunch of memes and legendary moments for anyone that happens to watch it. But today I wanted to take a look at one of the dirtiest restaurants that Gordon Ramsay has ever stepped foot into. Now online there are a couple episodes that are supposedly the worst and dirtiest kitchens ever filmed during the course of the show's runtime. So with today's video, let's take a look at just 2 of the most mentioned kitchens for their dirtiness, and at the end of the video we could decide which restaurant was the dirtiest. If you want me to make more videos like this one, leave a like and also mention it in the comments below which restaurant you want me to look at. Now, a lot of the time, we only notice how dirty the kitchen is within the first 20 minutes of the show when Gordon Ramsay investigates the back of the house. Now, if you don't know what back of the house is, it just means kitchen. The front of the house just means the restaurant part where people sit down and eat. And after that segment of the episode, Gordon usually explodes on the owner or manager or even the whole staff of the restaurant, and this usually gets it through their head that the restaurant needs to be cleaned and sanitary in order for him to relaunch the restaurant to see if he's even going to work on it. The 2 restaurants that I wanted to take a look at was the Secret Garden that aired on December 12th, 2007 for the first season of Kitchen Nightmares, and also Dillions, which premiered in September of that same year and for season 1 as well. These were the 2 kitchens mentioned a bunch online for having the worst kitchens throughout the Kitchen Nightmares history. Another restaurant was Oceana, but I couldn't find that episode, mostly because it was taken off of Hulu due to Kitchen Nightmares being sued twice by the owners of Oceana. The first restaurant I want to take a look at is the Secret Garden. In the beginning of the episode, we meet Michelle, who is an arrogant French chef that has owned the Secret Garden for 7 years. We also find out that Michelle is in debt over $300,000, and he wouldn't be able to keep his doors open for too much longer without the help of Gordon Ramsay. Upon arriving to the restaurant, Gordon is met with an out-of-date front of the house with old tables, chairs, and decor that all look like they were produced during the Renaissance era. Gordon then meets Michelle and asks the chef how long has his restaurant been a ghost town, and Michelle says that it's been slow ever since they opened the doors of the Secret Garden 7 years ago. After this quick introduction to Michelle, Gordon sits in the restaurant to try his food, and from the moment he sits down, he already gets a feel for how dirty the kitchen will be when he points out a dirty glass that was placed onto the table in front of him. This glass would be the least of his worries though, because after waiting for his food to come out, he'd receive another dish that was dirty and greasy and chipped on the side. But those 2 dishes would not compare to what Chef Ramsay would uncover later on in the episode. After his meal, Gordon went to the back of the house to speak to Michelle and talk about how bad his food was and how he just didn't like it. And Michelle would tell Gordon Ramsay that he enjoys his own food, and Jane, one of the servers, would vouch for Michelle and say that she never gets bad complaints about how the food tastes bad, only if the food is cold or it took too long to get out to the customer. With this newfound knowledge of Michelle's arrogance, Gordon Ramsay leaves the restaurant only to return the next day when nobody was around so that he can take a closer look at the kitchen and the walk-in coolers to see what Michelle is doing behind the scenes and what Michelle might be hiding from Gordon Ramsay. Before taking a look at the walk-in coolers and freezers, Gordon takes a look at the grease traps and equipment where he'd find dust and built up grease that hasn't been changed in what looks to be months. And with a buildup in grease on a grill or a flat top, this could become a huge fire hazard if the grease catches on fire. That's, Bills used to be a chef, so I kind of know that. Gordon then walks into the first cooler where he is met with one of the dirtiest coolers he has ever seen during the first season of the show. Mold started to grow on the racks and other containers and bottles, which could potentially be poisonous if consumed. There was also a lot of food items in the cooler that were uncovered and not properly labeled, which is bad because it's unorganized, and having uncovered food allows particles in the air to fall onto the food and spread bacteria. The state of the walk-in cooler cooler was so bad that Gordon Ramsay found maggots within the potatoes and other produce alongside of the potatoes, which sent him to the bathroom to throw up. Shortly after Gordon's investigation of the kitchen and him throwing up in the bathroom, Michelle strolls into the restaurant to find Gordon Ramsay. Gordon asked Michelle a couple of questions, like who organizes the cooler, to which Michelle replied saying that he and the cooks do. Gordon would then ask him when the cooler was deep cleaned last, and Michelle stated that it was deep cleaned the day prior to Gordon Ramsay going through the kitchen. Obviously, lying to Gordon Ramsay is a horrible idea, so he starts to call Michelle out for his lies, pointing out that the bottles were growing mold in the back of the cooler, which obviously means that Michelle was not properly going through his walk-in to clean them. Gordon Ramsay would ask Michelle if he's given up, and Michelle would say no. This would offend Michelle, and instead of taking the criticism like an adult, he'd start to ask Gordon if his kitchen is always up to par with safety standards, and Gordon would say that they're always clean. And then Michelle would go on a tangent about all the impressive chefs that he's worked with throughout his cooking history. He then says that he makes a lot of money with the restaurant and pretty much makes it seem like he doesn't need Gordon Ramsay's help. So then Gordon asks him how much money he's made within the past 7 years, and Michelle says that he can't answer that question and he needs the question to be simplified, to which Gordon then asks him how much profit did the restaurant make in just 1 year, and Michelle just sits there dumbfounded and couldn't answer the question. On the third day, Michelle and his staff take the day to clean the whole entire kitchen to get ready for relaunch. After finally deep cleaning the kitchen, it seemed like Michelle was going to listen to the advice that Gordon Ramsay gave him, but he'd start to resort back to his old ways. After the show aired, the kitchen remained clean, but Chef Michelle found himself having to sell the restaurant in March of 2010, just 3 years after the episode aired. Michelle would share his goodbye onto Facebook stating, "Dear friends, it is with heavy heart that we inform you that Saturday, November 28th will be Chef Michelle's last day at the Secret Garden. The business has been sold. We are so thankful for so many things. At this time of year, we celebrate you, our incredible customers that have come to feel more like family. Thank you for your patronage and support. Chef Michelle is looking into other ventures. Keep an eye on your inbox or like us on Facebook to stay up to date with what's happening next." He'd move on to a new restaurant where he'd work at for a couple years before buying it. And then the Secret Garden would close its doors for good just 5 years later in 2015. Now the next kitchen I want to take a look at is Dillions, which is one of my favorite episodes to ever air on Kitchen Nightmares. This restaurant is in New York and is actually just a couple blocks down the road from Gordon Ramsay's restaurant, The London. But if you think that it'll be anything like Gordon's restaurant, you'd be sadly mistaken. Dillions is an Indian restaurant but has 2 other menus to choose from, like an Italian menu and British menu, and that's probably because Dylan has 3 different managers. The lack of management quality will be a constant issue during this episode. In the beginning of the episode, we are introduced to the 3 different managers, like Khan, who is a floor manager, Martin, the general manager, and the one that is responsible for the many different menus, and finally Andrew, who is the operations manager and also the cook for the American food dishes, because the chefs that are in the kitchen don't know how to cook American food. Mohammed is the owner, and he states that within the past 6 months, they have been losing $20,000 to $30,000 each and every month that they are open, and how he was very close to closing the doors. When Gordon enters Dillions, he's immediately discovering problems, like an uneven table which moves with weight, which he calls the managers out almost instantly, because how isn't that fixed with 3 managers and with the restaurant not being busy? But that table will be the least of his worries. As Gordon sits to order his food, he swats away a bunch of flies, and this is a huge problem because it's just another sign that the restaurant is extremely dirty, either behind the scenes or behind the big curtains that are in the restaurant. Gordon orders an appetizer that was supposed to be vegetarian, but it ended up having meat in the fritter, which would be a lawsuit if Gordon was vegetarian. The issue for the miscommunication is the chefs not understanding English that well. So when the servers try to communicate with them, the chefs don't understand what the server is trying to tell them because there's a language barrier. Then Gordon is served another meal, and the server puts down a dirty plate, which he points out right after she places it in front of him. He also points out that the tomato on top of his rice was rotten. He'd find out once he walked into the kitchen that he was served old lamb. After this, Gordon spectated a dinner rush to see how Dylan's staff works. The chefs put containers that are filled with sauce on the floor, which is unhygienic and could kill someone. Gordon tells Mohammed to tell the chefs to stop placing containers filled with food on the floor because it's disgusting. Now the next day, Chef Ramsay does his investigation of the kitchen, and up to this point, the situation is pretty bad, but would only get worse when Gordon would find old flycatchers, really old food, green hamburgers, and very old potatoes that were cooked a week prior, and were also served to him with the salmon he ordered, but instead, he made the operations manager eat the food. He'd then walk downstairs to the walk-in coolers and storage and saw cockroaches roaches, rat traps, rotten food in the cooler, and cockroaches inside the coolers as well. This is where the flies were breeding. He pulls out a bag of spring mix lettuce, and it's extremely watery and slimy, which just means that it's really old. While Chef Ramsey is going off on Martin for not paying attention to the quality of his walk-in coolers or the food that is being made, food is still leaving the kitchen, and what left the kitchen was a rotten part of the tomato. So Gordon Ramsay pretty much screams at the chefs, screams at the servers, and asks them where the tomato went because that could seriously get somebody sick. So after he started freaking out, he tells the servers to go shut down the restaurant and tell the customers to leave. That night, he'd bring his crew in to steam clean the restaurant in order to kill all the flies and the cockroaches that were in the walk-in coolers. The next day, Gordon brings in a new chef to help the existing chefs with new foods on the menu. And Martin, the general manager, would quit his job after Gordon questioned his ability to run and operate the restaurant after Gordon leaves. After this episode aired, Martin actually tried to sue Gordon Ramsay and Kitchen Nightmares for $3 million for hindering his career with future job opportunities. More specifically, this suit was also to try to stop the airing of the episode because it made Martin look really bad. There is like a whole documentations on it that you can actually look up, and it was pretty much saying that Gordon Ramsay kind of like fabricates the restaurant to make it look way worse on camera than what it really is. But Martin trying to sue Gordon Ramsay kind of just got thrown out the window because there was either a lack of evidence or they just didn't care. Now, during one of the update episodes of Kitchen Nightmares, Gordon goes back to the restaurant and it was still clean like when Gordon left it a couple months prior. But Purnima ended up closing in 2019, just a couple years after the whole transformation. After watching both of these episodes over and over again, it's quite easy to decide which restaurant is the absolute worst out of the two, and that's Dillions. The difference between the two restaurants and how gross they were comes down to the first impressions. The Secret Garden wasn't as bad, and there wasn't anything in the front of the house that would make it even more noticeable with how dirty the actual restaurant was. The only thing that was pretty dirty was the glass in the dish, but the real issue was in the kitchen with the walk-in coolers, which Michelle didn't really care about anymore. This episode did show Gordon Ramsay throwing up because of the maggots that were in the produce, but it was a fairly easier fix than trying to clean Dillions. Dillions was horrible upon entry into the restaurant. Gordon was swarmed with flies and received a dirty dish, rotten food, and food that he didn't even order. Gordon was in Dillions by himself, but the food was still horrible and still took a little bit longer to get out. Everything was bad, from the kitchen coolers all the way to the line cook refrigerators that were filled with old rotten food. Nothing was labeled and it seemed like everything was terrible. Dillions was absolutely horrible and showcased everything that could and will go wrong if your kitchen is mismanaged with people who are incompetent to run the kitchen. Dillions takes the award for the grossest kitchen ever showcased on Kitchen Nightmares. Do you think there's an even worse restaurant? Leave the name of it in the comments below, and I'll definitely watch the episode because I love Kitchen Nightmares and I'd watch it, relentlessly. So if you guys want me to watch any episodes, just leave it down below. Also, if you enjoyed the video and want me to do more videos like this, where I take a look at Gordon Ramsay's shows or all of his spin-off shows, just make sure to leave a like and comment down below which one I should look at. But this is the end of the video. If you want to send me suggestions for the next video, the best way to do so is by sending a DM on Instagram or joining the Discord and sending me a suggestion there. They'll both be in the description below, and along with those links, there'll be a link to my second channel where I do commentary videos that won't be put up on this main channel. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to never ever miss any new episodes. And again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.